Hello and welcome to Downtime Activities. This is Matthew, and today we're going to be doing the Help Action Episode 4, our series where we break down an RPG rule or concept and give you guys some usable advice and information on it. Today we're going to be going over spell scrolls. Spell scrolls are super cool and oftentimes rarely or not used at all in a lot of D&D games. So I'm going to be breaking down the spell scroll 5th edition rules for you today, as well as giving you 2 optional rules, kind of homebrews that I've come up with that make spell scrolls more accessible for everyone to use, and I think make them a lot more fun in play. So let's get into it.
To start us off, I am going to go over the rules as written for spell scrolls in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I will not be going into detail on crafting spell scrolls during this video. If you're interested in getting an in-depth breakdown on that, we have a previous episode of the Help Action that you can go check out, and I really recommend that you do. It'll break down this whole system in much greater detail. As far as the spell scroll rules themselves, they go as follows. If the spell on a spell scroll is on your class's spell list, you can use an action to cast the spell without providing any components. The components were already provided during the crafting of that spell scroll. If it is a higher level than you can normally cast, then you must make an ability check using your spellcasting ability equal to a DC of 10 plus the spell's level. If you fail this check, the words disappear from the spell scroll and it has no effect, thus wasting the spell scroll. After the scroll is successfully used, the words similarly fade and the scroll crumbles to dust. Wizards can also copy spells from spell scrolls onto their spellbook using an Arcana check, DC equal to 10 plus the spell level. Whether this is a successful check or not, the scroll is destroyed, but if it is successful, they get to copy it over into their book to later prepare. One final but very important distinction to bring up here is the difference between spell scrolls and magic scrolls, i.e. scrolls of protection. A spell scroll is made by a spellcaster and specifically holds a spell that can then be used when the spell scroll is used. Magic scrolls can be used by anybody and have set effects. With these rules as written, spellcasters are the only people who can use scrolls. Specifically, only spellcasters who have those spells from the scrolls on their list. I don't like this limitation. I have quite a few issues with this that I'll break down here. I think that spell scrolls are super cool consumables that can be really fun in play, but non-spellcasters are completely unable to use them. This limitation, I think, is not necessary and takes away from the fun of the game. Also, even powerful spellcasters, like a 20th level cleric, would not be able to use a spell scroll of a first level spell that's outside of their list. This limitation doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Because of my dissatisfaction with this system and the limitations there within, I have decided that I should be the person to come up with some solutions for it. I've made a couple of rule systems that I think do a good job of giving more access to spell scroll use while not breaking your game. A brief side note here for players: if your group doesn't want to use these rules that I've come up with and instead wants to use the rules as written, please still use spell scrolls more often. I think that they are a super cool way to have spell slots saved and kind of have niche use spells always on hand. And pay attention to your lists, because there's a lot of spells that one class could make spell scrolls for that, while another character may not have prepared, is on their list and they would still be able to use. So even with the rules as written, spell scrolls are powerful, cool utility and should be used often. Another brief side note here for DMs: whether you use my optional rules or not, please start including spell scrolls as loot more often in your games. Also, open up the opportunity for players to spend time to craft spell scrolls if they have an interest in doing so. More consumable items can make for more interesting combat, and I think it's pretty hard to really break the system unless players are intentionally doing so, in which case it's time for a come to Jesus talk with them. Now let's get into my solutions. I don't believe that allowing any class to use, or in some cases attempt to use, any scroll will break your game, especially if you have a good group of players who won't overly abuse it. So I've made 2 different systems that will allow anybody to have at least a chance to cast any spell from any spell scroll. My first solution here is a very lenient one. This is for a DM who really trusts their players and know that they won't go out of their way to break the system. The rules here go as follows. Any player can use any scroll of a spell level no higher than half of their character level, rounded down, without a check. If the spell is higher level and not on the character's spell list, the character must make an ability check using the spellcasting ability of the spell on the scroll, the DC equal to 10 plus the spell level, like the basic rules. If the spell is higher level but is on the character's class spell list, the character makes the same check, but with proficiency. If this seems a little too open and loose to you, I made a second set of rules that is a little more limiting but still gives good opportunity for everybody involved. They go as follows. If using a scroll for a spell on your class's spell list, follow the rules as normal from the DMG. If casting a spell from a scroll that is not on your class's spell list, you must always make an ability check using the spellcasting ability of the spell on the scroll, DC equal to 10 plus the spell level. If the check fails, the scroll is expended with no effect. This will allow others to try and use scrolls, but requires a risk versus reward assessment because of the chance to burn scrolls with no effect. I will be likely using that first set of rules for my own games, but both I think do a good job of opening up the use of spell scrolls to everybody without giving it free reign, easy, every time you use a scroll it's going to work kind of power level. I know some people probably have concerns about making spell scrolls so easily available, but let me break down why I feel these rules really needed to be changed. Making scrolls usable by everyone allows for them to be used in more and more different ways, and allows the DM to give them out as loot more often, without fear of only certain characters being able to really get any use out of them. It also allows spellcasters in the party to make scrolls for their friends that can help them, i.e. invisibility for the rogue, or shield of faith for the fighter, cure wounds for any and everyone. This is somewhere that could get out of hand with players trying to abuse this system and make huge backpacks of scrolls for every character in the party, but if you communicate clearly with your group, and your group is not the kind of people who will try and overly abuse a system like this, problems can typically be avoided. Also, the creation of scrolls has a cost, gold and time, and that will limit abuse as well, especially at lower levels. For a group not going out of their way to break the system, this will be pretty hard to abuse. And if you have a player in your group that is pushing the limits on what you are comfortable with as the DM, then take them aside and let them know they need to dial it back, or you will have to reevaluate allowing this optional rule in your game. Remember, consumables are just that, consumable. One-time use items will have a hard time making a difference in more than a single encounter. Spell scrolls that the characters create are going to be spells that they could cast anyways, giving little room for substantial abuse, and all spell scrolls not created by the players will be given out and, hopefully, curated by you, the GM, so you can avoid game-breaking issues by not giving out game-breaking scrolls to your players. At the end of the day, the idea of this game is to have fun, and having more options and less limitations can lead to more fun, so long as there is clear communication between the DM and the players to avoid game-breaking and unfun decision-making.
That has been the Spell Scroll rules for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, as well as my personal homebrew rules that you can try in your own games to make spell scrolls more accessible to everybody. Please, if you do, go ahead and throw down in the comments how it goes, as well as any other advice you guys have for using spell scrolls or optional rules that you've come up with in your games to make spell scrolls more player-friendly. If you enjoyed the video, please also leave a like. We appreciate it very, very much. Now, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.